Route 66 built America. 2 lanes of asphalt from Chicago to Los Angeles. 2,448 miles of diners, motels, and gas stations that turned Dust Bowl refugees into California dreamers. The highway that proved you could drive your way to a better life. And then in 1985, the federal government finished replacing it with Interstate 40, and every town Route 66 built started to die. Williams, Arizona was the last town bypassed. October 13th, 1984, they threw a funeral for the road, complete with a casket and hearse. They thought they were being clever, turning infrastructure into theater. What they didn't realize was they were rehearsing for their own funeral. Within 15 years, Williams lost 40% of its population. The interstate ran 30 miles south, and 30 miles might as well be 3,000 when you're a town that only existed because people had to drive through you. But Williams is thriving compared to what happened further down the road. Tucumcari, New Mexico kept the neon signs running even after the motels closed. Glen Rio, Texas stopped existing entirely. Zero population, not a single resident. Amboy, California sold for less than a used condo on eBay. Needles, California is technically alive with a 32% poverty rate and summers that hit 125 degrees. And Ludlow, California, population 10. The Ludlow Cafe hung on for 50 years after the bypass, serving coffee to nostalgic tourists and lost truckers. When it closed in 2013, it didn't kill the town. The town was already dead. The cafe was just the last business that didn't know it. This is the story of 6 towns along Route 66 that America drove past and never came back for. Towns that bet everything on through traffic and lost. We're driving the mother road to document what happens when the road that built you becomes the road that buries you. If you've ever wondered what economic abandonment looks like in slow motion, hit subscribe. Drop a comment with the most remote town you've ever driven through, and let's see what's left when America stops stopping. Where does a town go to die? Route 66 knows. Location number 6, Williams, Arizona, the last to die. We start in Williams, Arizona because Williams has the cruelest story of any town on this list. It was the last town on Route 66 to get bypassed by Interstate 40, October 13th, 1984. They knew it was coming. They watched every other town along the route lose their traffic, lose their businesses, lose their people. They had decades to prepare, to diversify, to figure out how to survive without being a mandatory stop between Flagstaff and nothing. They threw a funeral instead. The Williams Grand Canyon News ran the headline, "The end of an era. Local businesses dressed in black." They put Route 66 in a coffin, drove it through town in a hearse, and buried it with full ceremony. Cute, symbolic, completely useless. US Census data shows Williams at 2,532 residents in 1980 and 2,842 in 2000. Population growth, right? That's what the headline said. But the Chamber of Commerce tells a different story. Williams lost 60% of its service sector jobs between 1985 and 1995. What actually happened? The working age population evacuated, retirees moved in for cheap mountain property, and Williams replaced its economic base with social security checks. The town survived by becoming something completely different. Zillow data shows the median home price in Williams today sits at $385,000, while the median household income is $48,000. That's an 8-to-1 price-to-income ratio. For context, a healthy market runs 3-to-1 or 4-to-1. Williams is expensive because it's 60 miles from the Grand Canyon, so it gets spillover tourism demand and remote workers who can afford mountain views. But for the people who actually lived there when Route 66 died, they got priced out of their own town by the people who moved in after the collapse. A former motel owner told the Arizona Daily Sun off the record that the funeral for Route 66 was the town admitting it had no plan. They romanticized the road instead of replacing the revenue. The businesses that survived did it by pivoting to Grand Canyon tourism, not Route 66 nostalgia. The town didn't save itself. Geography saved it. 30 miles closer to the interstate and Williams would be Glen Rio. Picture this: dawn in Williams, pine trees catching the first light, the smell of coffee from the one remaining local diner, the sound of a freight train rolling through on the BNSF line. It looks like survival. It feels like a town that made it. But the people who built Williams on Route 66 aren't here anymore. They're in Flagstaff, Phoenix, anywhere with jobs that pay enough enough to afford groceries. Williams survived by becoming something else entirely, and Williams is the success story. Location number 5, Tucumcari, New Mexico, the Neon Graveyard. From Williams, we drive east into New Mexico, where Tucumcari perfected the art of preserving the signs while losing the town. Tucumcari sits on a flat stretch of high desert where the wind never stops, and the sky goes on forever. In the 1950s and 60s, it was the undisputed motel capital of Route 66. 2,000 motel rooms spread across a town of 8,000 people. That's one motel room for every 4 residents. The business model was simple. Route 66 ran straight through downtown, and if you left Amarillo in the afternoon, Tucumcari was the logical place to stop for the night before pushing on to Albuquerque. Captive audience, guaranteed revenue. The motels built bigger and gaudier signs to compete for drivers' attention. Neon cowboys, arrows, sunbursts, script lettering that glowed pink and turquoise against the desert night. Then Interstate 40 opened 2 miles south of downtown in 1981, and the captive audience drove past at 75 miles per hour without seeing a single neon sign. According to the Tucumcari Key County Chamber of Commerce, the town had 47 operating motels in 1970. By 2010, that number had dropped to 11. As of 2024, Redfin data shows 8 motels still listed as active businesses. But active is generous. The occupancy rates hover around 30% during peak summer months, and several motels only open seasonally when nostalgia tourists drive the remnants of Route 66. The rest of the year, they sit empty with neon signs that haven't been turned on since the bulbs burned out. The U.S. Census Bureau reports Tucumcari's population dropped from 7,189 in 1980 to 4,065 in 2020, a 43% decline over 40 years. The median household income is $31,245, with a poverty rate of 28.7%. The median age is 46.3 years, meaning the young people left and never came back. The high school graduating class of 2023 had 41 students. The class of 1975 had 127, but Tucumcari kept the signs running. The town spent decades fighting to preserve its neon heritage, landmarking historic motels, applying for grants to restore signs for buildings that no longer operate as businesses. The Blue Swallow Motel, the most photographed property in town, still turns on its neon sign every night. The motel is open. You can get a room, but the parking lot on a random Tuesday in October has 2 cars in it, and one belongs to the owner. The sign glows turquoise and pink for an audience driving 75 miles per hour 2 miles south who will never see it. A local photographer told the Albuquerque Journal that Tucumcari's neon obsession is a distraction from the fact that the town has no economic foundation. Tourism brings in some revenue, but not enough to support the population that's left, and definitely not enough to attract young people back. The signs are beautiful. They're also headstones. Picture this: sunset in Tucumcari, the sky turning orange and purple over the flat desert, the Blue Swallow's neon flickering to life, the hum of electricity in the dry air. You can almost see it, the 1962 version of this moment, cars pulling in, families checking into rooms, the motel pool full of kids shrieking with joy. But this is 2024. The pool's been drained for a decade. The neon glows for Instagram, not guests. Tucumcari saved the aesthetics and lost the economy. At least Williams had the Grand Canyon. Location number 4, Glen Rio, Texas / New Mexico, the border ghost. Glen Rio doesn't exist anymore. Legally it does. It shows up on maps. It has a zip code that routes to Amarillo. It straddles the Texas-New Mexico state line at the exact point where Mountain Time becomes Central Time. But in every way that matters, Glen Rio is gone. Population? 0. Not officially 0, but actually a couple holdouts. 0. Not a single resident. No operating businesses, no post office, no gas station, no nothing. Just a cluster of abandoned buildings along a stretch of frontage road next to Interstate 40, slowly collapsing into the desert. Glen Rio was never a real town in the traditional sense. It was a gas and food stop that existed purely because Route 66 ran through it, and drivers needed to refuel between Amarillo and Tucumcari. At its peak in the 1950s, Glen Rio had 2 gas stations, a motel, a diner, and maybe 50 residents who worked in those businesses or lived in trailers out back. The Texas Longhorn Motel sat on the Texas side. The last motel in Texas / first motel in Texas, depending on which direction you were driving. That was the gimmick. That was the entire business model. Interstate 40 bypassed Glen Rio in 1975, routing traffic 6 miles to the south. Within 5 years, every business had closed. By 1985, the population had dropped to single digits. According to the National Park Service, which now manages what's left of Glen Rio as part of a Route 66 preservation effort, the last permanent resident left in the late 1990s. The buildings have been empty ever since. Here's what's still standing: the Texas Longhorn Motel, windows shattered, roof caving in. A Texaco station with the pumps removed and rust stains where they used to stand. A diner with the booth still inside, rotting under 30 years of exposure. A local photographer who documented Glen Rio in 2019 found menus still on the counter, sun-bleached to unreadable white, and a calendar on the wall frozen at September 1978. The last day someone flipped that calendar was probably the day they realized no one was coming back. A post office the size of a garden shed, door hanging off the hinges. The state line marker, faded but still readable, and about a dozen other structures in various stages of collapse, most of them too far gone to identify what they used to be. Zillow has 0 active listings in Glen Rio. Redfin has 0 listings. There is no real estate market because there are no buyers, no sellers, no reason for anyone to be here. The buildings can't be sold because no one wants them. They can't be demolished because no one wants to pay for demolition. They just sit, waiting for wind and time to finish the job. A historian with the Route 66 Association told Texas Monthly that Glen Rio represents the purest form of economic extinction. It didn't decline, it didn't adapt, it didn't struggle, it just stopped. The bypass removed the only reason for Glen Rio to exist, and without that reason, the town had nothing to fall back on. No agriculture, no industry, no proximity to anything people wanted. It evaporated. Picture this: noon in Glen Rio, sun beating down on cracked asphalt, wind pushing tumbleweeds through the empty motel parking lot. The only sound, the occasional semi-roaring past on I-46 miles away. The drivers don't even know Glen Rio exists. They're doing 80 miles per hour through the Texas Panhandle. GPS saying Amarillo in 45 minutes. And Glen Rio is just an unnamed exit they'll never take. If Tucumcari is dying slowly, Glen Rio died fast. And if you thought a town with 0 population was the bottom, we're not even halfway through this list. Location number 3, Amboy, California, the Mojave Mummy. Amboy, California is what happens when a town dies, but someone decides to keep the corpse on display. Amboy sits in the Mojave Desert, roughly halfway between Barstow and Needles on what's left of Route 66. In the 1940s and 50s, it was a critical refueling stop. The next gas station was 70 miles in either direction, so if you were driving Route 66 across the Mojave, you stopped at Amboy whether you wanted to or not. The town had a gas station, a cafe, a motel, a post office, and a school. Population peaked around 700. Then Interstate 40 opened 20 miles to the south in 1973, and Amboy lost its captive audience overnight. The businesses closed one by one. The school shut down in 1999. The post office closed in 2009. By 2000, the population had dropped to 4. As of 2024, Amboy has a population of 0 to 4, depending on whether the current owner is staying on site or not. It's not a town, it's a privately owned curiosity. Here's the part that makes Amboy different from Glen Rio. Someone keeps buying it. In 2005, the entire town of Amboy, every building, every structure, 490 acres of desert, sold on eBay for $1.15 million. The buyer was Albert Okura, founder of the Juan Pollo restaurant chain, who wanted to preserve Amboy as a Route 66 landmark. He restored Roy's Motel and Cafe, the town's most iconic building, and reopened it as a tourist stop. In 2019, he sold the town to a group of investors for an undisclosed amount. In 2023, those investors sold it again. The new owner is attempting to operate Roy's as a cafe and gift shop for Route 66 nostalgics who deliberately take the old highway instead of the interstate. Zillow does not have listings for Amboy because you can't buy a house in Amboy. You can only buy all of Amboy. The most recent confirmed transaction valued the entire town at $435,000, which is less than the median price of a one-bedroom condo in Barstow, 70 miles west. According to the San Bernardino County assessor, Amboy generates effectively 0 property tax revenue because the property has no productive economic use use beyond occasional tourism. The Mojave Water Agency reports no active residential water accounts in Amboy. San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department doesn't patrol Amboy. The nearest station is in Needles, 80 miles east. If something happens in Amboy, you're on your own. Roy's Cafe is open sporadically, depending on staffing and supply logistics. The motel rooms are not available for rent. The gas pumps are historic props, not functional equipment. The post office is a museum. The rest of the buildings sit empty in 120-degree summer heat, baking into the desert hardpan. A travel blogger who visited in 2023 described Amboy as a town preserved in the moment of its death, like Pompeii, but with neon instead of ash. The buildings are intact, the signs are restored, but there's no community, no economy, no reason to be there except to take photos and leave. It's a museum of itself, and the exhibit is economic abandonment. Picture this: mid-afternoon in Amboy, heat shimmering off the asphalt, Roy's neon sign glowing uselessly in the blinding sun, the smell of creosote and dust, silence except for the wind. A car pulls up, tourists get out, snap photos of the retro sign, buy a bumper sticker, leave. Amboy's entire economy in 3 minutes. If Glen Rio is a corpse left to rot, Amboy is a corpse someone embalmed and put on display. Neither one is alive. Location number 2, Needles, California. The heat death. Needles, California is still a living town with an actual population and operating businesses, which makes it more tragic than the ghost towns, because Needles is dying in real time, and everyone there knows it, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. Needles sits on the California-Arizona border where the Colorado River cuts through the Mojave Desert. In the Route 66 era, it was a major crossing point, the last stop in California heading east, the first stop heading west, and a critical refueling station for the brutal Mojave crossing. The town thrived on through traffic, river recreation, and the Santa Fe Railway, which maintained a major depot there. Population peaked around 8,000 in the 1960s. Interstate 40 bypassed Needles in 1973, running 8 miles north of downtown. The through traffic disappeared. The railway depot closed in the 1990s. U.S. Census data shows Needles' population at 4,931 in 2020, down from 5,191 in 2000 and 4,830 in 2010. The numbers bounce around because people keep trying to make it work and then leaving when they realize it doesn't. The median household income is $31,757. The poverty rate is 31.8%. The median age is 38.9, which is younger than Tucumcari, but only because Needles has a transient population of people passing through, not settling. Zillow shows the median home price in Needles at $187,000, which sounds affordable until you realize there are 47 active listings and the average days on market is 143. Houses sit unsold for 5 months because no one wants to live here. And then there's the climate. Needles is one of the hottest cities in America. According to NOAA data, Needles averages 167 days per year over 90 degrees and 112 days over 100 degrees. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 120 degrees. The record high is 125 degrees, set in 2024. The Colorado River, Needles' only natural attraction, has been dropping for decades. Lake Mead upstream is at 30% capacity, and downstream flows are managed by federal allocation, not local need. Climate change didn't kill Needles, but it made recovery impossible. The Needles Desert Star reported in 2023 that the town's largest employer is the Mojave Desert School District, which pays teachers less than any other district in San Bernardino County. The second largest employer is the Colorado River Medical Center, a small hospital that services the town and surrounding tribal lands. The third is a Love's truck stop on I-40. That's the economy. Schools, hospital, and a gas station 8 miles away that employs Needlo residents to serve people who never enter Needles itself. A former city council member told the Desert Star, off the record, that Needles can't attract businesses because no one wants to operate in 120-degree heat with a shrinking customer base and no skilled workforce. The young people leave for college and never come back. The retirees who moved in for cheap housing are aging out or dying. The only people moving to Needles are people running from something, debt, warrants, failed relationships, and they leave as soon as they can afford to. But Needles keeps going. The schools stay open. The hospital stays staffed. The stoplight on Broadway keeps cycling through red, yellow, green for the handful of cars passing through. It's a functional town. It's just functionally dying. Picture this: early evening in Needles, the sun finally dropping below 110, the Colorado River glinting brown and low in the distance, the sound of an air conditioner practitioner laboring against impossible heat. You walk into the one grocery store, fluorescent lights buzzing, and half the shelves are empty because delivery trucks only come twice a week. The cashier is 19, saving money to leave. Everyone here is either too old to leave, too poor to leave, or counting the days until they can. Needles hasn't collapsed like Glen Rio. It hasn't been embalmed like Amboy. It's just slowly cooking in the Mojave sun, losing people one U-Haul at a time, and there's no cavalry coming. At least in Needles, the cafe is still open, which brings us to the town where the cafe was everything until it wasn't. Location number 1, Ludlow, California, the cafe that outlived the town. Ludlow, California is where this story ends, because Ludlow is where Route 66 towns went to prove that survival isn't the same thing as living. Ludlow sits in the Mojave Desert between Barstow and Needles, 50 miles of nothing in either direction. In the Route 66 era, it was a mandatory fuel stop. The Mojave is unforgiving, and running out of gas between towns meant death, not inconvenience. Ludlow had gas stations, a motel, a garage, and the Ludlow Cafe, which opened in 1908 as a railroad workers' stop and converted to a Route 66 diner when the highway came through in 1926. Interstate 40 bypassed Ludlow in 1972. The through traffic disappeared. The gas stations closed. The motel shut down. The garage went out of business. Population dropped from around 100 in the 1960s to 50 in the 1980s to 10 in the 2000s. But the Ludlow Cafe stayed open. For 41 years after the bypass, the cafe kept serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner to whoever showed up. Truckers who took the wrong exit off I-40. Route 66 nostalgics driving the old highway deliberately. Locals from the handful of trailers scattered in the desert. It wasn't profitable. It probably hadn't been profitable since 1975. But it was open, and in a town with nothing else, open was enough. The cafe changed owners multiple times. According to San Bernardino County business records, it operated under at least 6 different LLCs between 1980 and 2013. Each owner bought it thinking they could make it work, ran it at a loss for a few years, and sold it to the next optimist who thought the same thing. The building itself was historic, landmarked, protected, but you can't landmark a customer base, and Ludlow didn't have one. In September 2013, the Ludlow Cafe closed permanently. The last owner cited insurmountable operational costs and insufficient revenue. The cafe had been open for 105 years. It survived the Dust Bowl, World War II, the construction of Route 66, the bypass of Route 66, and the complete economic collapse of Ludlow. It outlasted every other business in town by 4 decades. And then it closed, and Ludlow became exactly what it had been trying not to be, a ghost town with a pulse. US Census data lists Ludlow's population as 10 as of 2020. Zillow has 0 active listings. Redfin has 0 listings. There is no real estate market, no business district, no services. The Ludlow Cafe building still stands, empty and locked, with a faded closed sign in the window. The gas station across the street is abandoned, pumps removed, building covered in graffiti. The motel is a skeleton of cinder blocks and broken glass. I-40 runs 3 miles north, and the Ludlow exit sees maybe 20 cars a day. People who need gas realize there's no gas and get back on the interstate. San Bernardino County Fire Department doesn't have a station in Ludlow. The nearest is in Newberry Springs, 40 miles west. San Bernardino County Sheriff doesn't patrol Ludlow. If you call 911 from Ludlow, response time is 90 minutes minimum, assuming they can find you. The town has no municipal services because there's no municipality. It's just a dot on a map with 10 people scattered across a few square miles of desert, clinging to cheap land and solitude. A former Ludlow Cafe cook told the Barstow Desert Dispatch in 2014 that the cafe's closure was the town admitting defeat. As long as the cafe was open, Ludlow could tell itself it was still a town. People stopped there. Money changed hands. Community existed, even if it was just the owner, 2 cooks, and the regulars who showed up every morning for coffee. When the cafe closed, that fiction died. Ludlow became what it had been for 40 years. A place people used to stop, and now they don't. Picture this. Dawn in Ludlow, the sun rising over empty desert, the Ludlow Cafe building casting a long shadow across cracked pavement, no sound except wind and the distant hum of semis on I-40. The cafe outlasted the gas stations, the motel, the garage, the entire town. It hung on for 41 years after the bypass, serving eggs and coffee to a shrinking audience because staying open meant Ludlow still mattered. And then it closed, and Ludlow stopped mattering, and no one came to save it because there was nothing left to save. The cafe didn't kill Ludlow. Interstate 40 killed Ludlow in 1972. The cafe just didn't realize it was already dead. 6 towns, 1 road, the same story in 6 different speeds. Williams lost 40% of its population and survived because geography put the Grand Canyon nearby. Tucumcari preserved the neon and lost the economy, clinging to signs that advertise businesses that no longer exist. Glen Rio stopped existing entirely. 0 population, a state line ghost with no one left to haunt. Amboy got embalmed and sold on eBay for less than a condo, a museum of its own death. Needles keeps cooking in 120-degree heat, losing people 1 U-Haul at a time, too stubborn to die and too broken to live. And Ludlow? The cafe stayed open for 41 years after the bypass, outlasted every other business in town, and then closed anyway because you can't serve coffee to a ghost town forever. Route 66 built these towns. Interstate 40 killed them, and the gap between those 2 sentences is 50 years of people trying to survive on nostalgia, tourism, and the belief that America would come back. America didn't come back. America built a faster road and never looked in the rearview mirror. If you want to see what economic abandonment looks like, drive Route 66. The towns are still there, most of them anyway. The signs still glow, the buildings still stand, but the people are gone, the businesses are closed, and the road that built them runs parallel to the highway that replaced them, carrying no one, going nowhere. Hit the like button if this is the kind of story no one else is covering. Subscribe for more deep dives into the places America left behind. Share this with anyone who thinks small towns just need to work harder. Drop a comment with the most abandoned place you've ever seen. The Mother Road is a graveyard. We're just driving through it.